In the heart of a typical suburban neighborhood where the streets wound gently around manicured lawns and tidy pastel-colored houses, life moved at a quiet and predictable rhythm. Every morning, the sun rose over the rows of houses, casting long shadows across the white picket fences, and every evening it dipped below the horizon, bathing the neighborhood in a soft twilight glow. Children played on sidewalks, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Dogs barked, and the occasional car drove by, creating a symphony of sounds that spoke of safety and community. It was a place where doors were left unlocked and neighbors knew each other by name. In one such house lived the Thompson family. Their home was a cozy, two-story structure, painted a gentle shade of blue. Inside, the walls were adorned with family photos, each one freezing a moment in time, a testament to happiness and unity. The Thompsons were a typical family. Mark, the father, a diligent office worker. Linda, the mother, a warm-hearted homemaker. And their son, Timmy, a bright and curious 8-year-old. Timmy was an imaginative child, often lost in his own world, crafting stories and adventures with his toys and books. He had a keen interest in the mysteries of life, always asking questions that seemed far beyond his years. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Timmy posed a question that caught his parents off guard. "What happens when you die?" he asked, looking up from his plate with wide, inquisitive eyes. Mark and Linda exchanged a glance, unsure of how to respond. It was a heavy question for a child, yet there was something in Timmy's gaze that demanded an answer. "Well, sweetie," Linda began cautiously, "everyone has different beliefs about what happens after we die. Some people think we go to heaven. Others believe we're born again. What matters is how we live our lives." Timmy nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer, although a shadow of curiosity lingered in his expression. Little did they know, this question would be the beginning of something they couldn't have imagined. A few nights later, Timmy woke to a soft whispering sound. It was a murmur, barely audible, yet insistent. Sitting up in bed, he rubbed his eyes, listening intently. The whispers seemed to be coming from the corner of his room. Fear mixed with intrigue as he slid out of bed and tiptoed across the floor, his heart thudding in his chest. In the dim light, he saw a faint glow, a shimmer that seemed to dance in the air. He blinked, and suddenly, standing before him, was a figure, ethereal and translucent. "Hello, Timmy," the voice said, soft and melodic. "Don't be afraid." Timmy took a step back, his small frame trembling. "Who are you?" "My name is Ilara," the figure replied. "I've come to help you understand your question." "You mean about what happens when you die?" Timmy asked, his curiosity piqued despite his fear. Ilara nodded. "Yes, but there's something more you must know. There are others like me, and some of them are not as kind." With that, Ilara faded away, leaving Timmy alone in the dark room. He crawled back into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with restless dreams and shadows dancing on the walls. Days passed, and Timmy couldn't shake off the encounter. He noticed things he hadn't before. Flickering lights, cold drafts where there shouldn't be any, and the faint echo of whispers following him. He tried to tell his parents, but they dismissed his stories as the product of an overactive imagination. Frustrated, yet undeterred, Timmy began to pay closer attention, jotting down what he observed in a small notebook he kept hidden under his pillow. One evening, as Timmy was playing in the backyard, he felt a chill run down his spine. Turning around, he saw Ilara standing at the edge of the garden, her form shimmering in the dying light of the day. "Timmy, you must be careful," she warned. "There are others who wish to mislead you. To make you afraid. Why? Timmy asked, stepping closer. Because fear gives them power, Ilara replied solemnly. You have a gift, Timmy, a connection to the world beyond. But it is also a burden. Timmy listened, captivated and bewildered. What do I do? Trust your heart and your instincts. I will be here to guide you. With that, Ilara disappeared again, leaving Timmy staring at the empty space where she had stood. He felt a strange mix of comfort and unease, as if he was standing at the edge of a vast, unknown ocean. As days turned into weeks, the whisperings grew more frequent and vivid. Timmy often awoke to find objects in his room moved or rearranged. One night, he was startled awake by a loud thud. He looked around, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, and saw a shadow moving across the wall. It was different from Ilara, darker and more menacing. The air felt heavy, pressing down on him with an intangible force. "Timmy," the shadow hissed, its voice a harsh rasp that clawed at his senses. "Come to me." Timmy froze, fear rooting him to the spot. He knew instinctively that this was one of the malevolent entities Ilara had warned him about. Summoning all his courage, he squeezed his eyes shut and shouted, "Go away! Leave me alone!" The shadow recoiled as if struck, slowly dissipating into the air. Timmy sat up in bed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The room was still once more, but he could feel the lingering presence of what had just occurred. The next day, Timmy was unusually quiet at breakfast. His parents noticed his sullen demeanor, but attributed it to a bad night's sleep, unaware of the battle he was fighting in the silence of his room. That night, Ilara appeared again, her expression more serious than before. "You were brave, Timmy, but you must know that they will try again. They are drawn to you because of your connection." "What can I do?" Timmy asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I will teach you how to strengthen your defenses," Ilara said gently. "It will take time, but you must believe in yourself." Under Ilara's guidance, Timmy began to learn how to harness his inner strength. She taught him to envision a protective barrier around himself, a shield of light that would ward off the dark entities. He practiced this every night, focusing on the warmth and safety it provided. As he grew more confident, the encounters with the malevolent spirits became less frequent. Even so, Timmy remained vigilant, aware that they were always lurking on the edges of his perception, waiting for a moment of weakness. One evening, as the family sat in the living room, the air suddenly grew cold. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Timmy felt a familiar chill. Knowing instinctively that something was coming, he glanced at his parents, who seemed oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. "Mom? Dad?" Timmy said, his voice steady yet urgent. "We need to go outside." Linda looked at him, puzzled. "What's wrong, honey?" "Please, just trust me," Timmy pleaded, his eyes wide with urgency. Sensing the seriousness in his tone, his parents reluctantly followed him out onto the porch. As soon as they stepped outside, the temperature plummeted, and a violent wind whipped through the trees. The house behind them groaned as if under some tremendous weight. "What is happening?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with fear. Timmy knew this was the moment all his preparations had led to. He closed his eyes, envisioning the protective barrier Ilara had taught him to create. The wind howled, carrying with it the voices of the dark spirits. But Timmy stood firm, concentrating with all his might. Slowly, the wind began to die down, the pressure lifting. The house ceased its groaning, and the air warmed once more. Timmy opened his eyes, feeling a sense of triumph and relief. He knew he had succeeded in keeping his family safe. Linda hugged him tightly, a mix of confusion and gratitude in her embrace. "I don't know what just happened, but thank you, Timmy." Mark nodded, still trying to process the events. "You did good, kiddo." That night, as Timmy lay in bed, Ilara appeared once more. Her presence was soothing, a balm to his weary mind. "You did well, Timmy. You have grown stronger than you realize." "Will they come back?" Timmy asked, concern lacing his words. "They may, but you are ready. Remember, you are never alone." With a soft smile, Ilara faded into the night, leaving Timmy with a newfound sense of peace. He knew that the world was full of mysteries, some beautiful, others terrifying, but he also knew that he possessed the courage to face them. In the days that followed, the neighborhood returned to its usual quietude, the events of that tumultuous night fading into memory. Yet, for Timmy, the experience had left an indelible mark, a reminder of the unseen forces that moved around them. He continued to live his life, embracing the joys and challenges it brought, ever watchful and aware of the thin veil that separated his world from the others. Sometimes he would feel a gentle breeze or catch a fleeting shimmer out of the corner of his eye, and he would smile, knowing Ilara was nearby, watching over him. He understood now that life was a journey, one that didn't end with death, but continued in ways he was only beginning to comprehend, and in that understanding he found comfort and strength. The neighborhood remained safe and comfortable, its calm exterior belying the hidden depths that Timmy had come to know. To the outside world, it was just another peaceful suburban enclave, but to Timmy, it was a place where the line between the living and the spectral was thin, where whispers carried secrets, and where he had learned that courage and kindness could bridge the gap between worlds. In the end, it wasn't the ghosts or the malevolent spirits that haunted him, but the lingering fear of the unknown, a fear he had learned to embrace and understand. For in that fear lay the potential for growth and discovery, a reminder that the world was as much about what was unseen as it was about what was visible. And so, Timmy lived on, a guardian of his little corner of the universe, watching, waiting, and wondering. In the quiet, rain-soaked town of Grays Harbor County, nestled amid the towering pines and incessant mist, life unfolded in a slow, predictable manner. Families went about their routines with a comforting regularity, as if synchronized with the rhythmic patter of the rain. The town was a place where stories whispered among the trees and the fog held secrets like an old friend. It was here that my family settled, seeking the tranquility that eluded us in the bustling chaos of city life. Our house, a modest structure that creaked with age, sat on the outskirts of town, its windows glazed over with the eternal dampness of the Pacific Northwest. It was a place that promised peace, a chance for my young son Thomas to thrive away from the noise and distractions of urban life. With his bright eyes and boundless imagination, he was the kind of child who could find magic in the mundane. At first, everything was as we had hoped. Thomas adapted quickly to his new surroundings, his laughter echoing through the halls, filling them with warmth. He would often play by himself, creating grand adventures with his toys, his face lit up by the glow of his imagination. I watched him with a contented heart, believing that our move had been the right decision. It wasn't long, however, before Thomas began speaking of a new friend, Piero. At first I thought nothing of it. Imaginary friends were a common phase for children his age. He described Piero as a clown, but not the garish kind that one might expect. Piero was different, he said, with a pale face, sad eyes, and a perpetual gentle smile. Thomas would talk to him frequently during his playtime, sharing secrets and stories only they were privy to. For a time, this imaginary friendship seemed harmless, even charming. It was a testament to Thomas's creativity, I told myself. But soon, the stories began to change. Piero, Thomas claimed, lived under his bed, behind a mysterious door that only he could see. It was a door that opened into another world, a world of endless possibilities where the laws of reality bent to imagination's will. Thomas would giggle about their adventures, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease, that made my heart stutter. The first disturbance came on a stormy night, when Tomas's screams shattered the stillness. I rushed to his room, my heart pounding, and found him huddled on his bed, eyes wide with terror. He pointed to the space beneath, insisting that Piero had shown him something terrible. Something that frightened him beyond words. When I looked under the bed, all I found was darkness and dust. But the fear in Tomas's eyes was real, tangible. I tried to comfort him, assuring him that Piero was just a figment of his imagination, that there was nothing to fear. But the conviction in his voice when he spoke of Piero made me question my assurances. As the days passed, Thomas became increasingly withdrawn. He spent more time in his room, whispering to Piero, his laughter replaced by an unsettling quiet. He stopped talking about the adventures they shared, and when pressed, he would only say that Pierre was sad, that the world behind the door had grown dark. Concerned, I decided to seek advice. I reached out to a child psychologist, hoping for a logical explanation. The doctor suggested that Thomas's vivid imagination and the upheaval of our move might have triggered a need for an imaginary friend. It was a common enough occurrence, he said, and with time and patience, Thomas would outgrow it. But his words offered little comfort. The change in Thomas was profound, and as a mother, I felt compelled to delve deeper into the shadowed corners of his mind. The escalation of events began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Objects in the house seemed to move of their own accord. A toy car in the hallway would find its way under the bed. A book left on the desk would appear on the floor in Thomas's room. My husband dismissed it as Thomas's doing, but I sensed something else at play. There was an energy, something palpable in the air, as if the house itself had begun to breathe with a life of its own. One evening, as I tidied Thomas's room, I noticed something peculiar. Beneath his bed, where he claimed the door resided, the floorboards seemed worn, as if a path had been tread repeatedly. I knelt down, peering into the gloom, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a shimmer, an outline of something that defied explanation. My heart raced, pounding like a drum in my chest. It was then that I heard it, a soft, mournful melody, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakably there. It was a lullaby, haunting and beautiful, echoing from somewhere deep within the shadows. Driven by equal parts fear and curiosity, I reached out, my hand brushing against the cold, unyielding wood of the floor. As if propelled by an unseen force, the melody grew louder, enveloping me in a cocoon of sound. I pulled back, my breath quickening, and the music ceased as abruptly as it had begun. I blinked, my mind struggling to reconcile the impossible with reality. It was just the wind, I told myself. An auditory illusion crafted by fatigue and imagination. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The climax came on a night swallowed by darkness, when the rain battered the windows with relentless fury. Thomas had been unusually quiet all day, his gaze distant and unfocused. As I tucked him into bed, he clutched my hand, his eyes pleading. "Mom," he whispered. "Piero says the door's closing. He says he needs me to stay." A chill ran down my spine. an instinctual dread that made my skin crawl. "No, Thomas," I said firmly, forcing a smile. "Piero isn't real. You don't have to listen to him." Thomas nodded, but his grip tightened. "He's afraid, Mom. He doesn't want to be alone." I smoothed his hair, struggling to mask my unease. "You're not alone either, Thomas. I'm here. I always will be." With a reluctant sigh, he released my hand, and I watched as his eyelids fluttered shut. I lingered by his bedside, listening to his breathing slow into the steady rhythm of sleep. But my mind was restless, churning with thoughts of Pierrot and the door. As the night deepened, a sound pulled me from the edge of sleep. It was a soft creaking, like the groan of an ancient tree swaying in the wind. I rose quietly, following the sound to Thomas's room. The door was ajar, and a faint glow emanated from within. My heart hammered as I stepped inside. There, under the bed, was a light, a thin line of luminescence tracing the outline of a door. I watched, frozen, as the door creaked open, revealing a realm bathed in an eerie, phosphorescent glow. Shadows danced within, shifting and swirling like smoke. And there, standing on the threshold, was a figure pale and wan, dressed in a harlequin's garb with a face painted in sorrowful expression. Piero. For a moment our eyes met, and I felt a tug, a pull towards the door, towards the unknown. But then I heard Thomas, a small, frightened whimper from behind me. That sound broke the spell, and I turned, scooping him into my arms. I backed away slowly, the door growing smaller, the light fading, until it was once again darkness beneath the bed. We left Grays Harbor County the very next day. I told my husband it was time to move on, that the town wasn't right for us after all. He agreed without protest, sensing the urgency in my voice, the desperation in my eyes. We packed quickly, eager to leave the memories behind. But even as we settled into a new home, a new life, the lingering fear remained. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, carried with it a reminder of Pierrot and the door. Thomas gradually returned to his old self, his laughter brightening the days once more. He never spoke of Pierrot again, and I dared not ask. Yet at night, when the world is silent and sleep eludes me, I sometimes think I hear a soft melody, a lullaby sung from the depths of shadows. In those moments, I wonder if Pierrot is still there, waiting behind the closed door, longing for the company of a child who can see him. And though I try to push the thought away, a part of me knows that some doors, once opened, are never truly closed. Living with Thomas was supposed to be a straightforward transition, a step towards deepening our relationship, a test of our compatibility. I moved into his modest apartment in the heart of the bustling city, a place that was a little cramped but cozy. There was a certain charm to the mismatched furniture, the faded wallpaper, the way the late afternoon sun painted the walls in shades of gold. It was a peaceful chapter in what I hoped would be a long story. Thomas's apartment was neat, almost meticulously so. He had a routine, one that I quickly adapted to. Mornings began with the smell of coffee, evenings ended with a shared meal. We had our separate workspaces but shared everything else, and I found comfort in the predictability. It was easy to slip into the rhythm of this new life, and I often caught myself smiling at the thought of how well we fit together. One rainy evening, as the drops tapped a steady rhythm against the window, I curled up on the couch with one of Thomas's sweaters. He had an extensive collection of them, always neatly folded in the closet, and they were perfect for the chill that crept into the apartment during the colder months. This one was soft and carried his scent, a mixture of soap and something distinctly him. It was then that I first noticed a subtle shift, something that would unravel the facade of our shared life. As I nestled deeper into the sweater, my fingers brushed against something tucked into its sleeve. Puzzled, I fished out a small note, yellowed with age and frayed at the edges. It was a simple piece of paper, yet what it held sent a ripple through the calm surface of my world. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant yet hurried. A message that simply read, "Do not forget what is yours." The note lingered in my thoughts, a persistent whisper. I considered asking Thomas about it, but a strange intuition warned me against it. Instead, I slipped the note back where I found it, telling myself it was nothing. Yet, it changed the way I looked at the apartment, the way I looked at Thomas. The questions it raised were insidious, seeping into the quiet moments of our daily life. Days turned to weeks, and the unease I felt grew. I began to notice small things, ways in which Thomas seemed preoccupied. The way his laughter at times felt forced. It was subtle, but my perception had shifted, casting shadows where none had existed before. I found myself observing him more closely, searching for clues to a mystery I could not define. There were times he would glance at me, his expression unreadable, as if he knew I was aware of something I shouldn't be. One evening, while Thomas was out running errands, I wandered around the apartment, lost in my thoughts. I found myself drawn to the bedroom closet, to the neatly arranged sweaters. It was a compulsion I couldn't ignore. Carefully, I went through the stack, checking each one for hidden notes. There was nothing, until the fourth sweater, where I found another note, identical in age and style, but this time the message read, "The key is in the box." The words sent a shiver down my spine. What box? I looked around the room, trying to decipher the message. There was nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that seemed to hold any secrets. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something crucial I was missing. I returned the note to its place, my heart pounding with the thrill and fear of discovery. What was Thomas hiding? And why did it feel like a puzzle meant specifically for me to solve? From then on, I was consumed by the mystery. I searched the apartment whenever I had the chance, careful not to disturb anything, to leave no trace of my intrusion. I examined the obvious places, the drawers, the bookshelves, the kitchen cabinets, but found nothing that fit the cryptic hints I had uncovered. Then, one afternoon, as I sat in the study, leafing through an old photo album, I noticed something odd about the bookshelf against the far wall. There was a discrepancy in the way the shelves were aligned, a slight misalignment that was nearly imperceptible yet caught my eye. Acting on a hunch, I tugged at the right side of the shelf, and to my astonishment, it swung open with a soft creak, revealing a narrow passageway. The hidden room was small, cramped, and filled with boxes. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, the air musty with neglect. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the thrill of discovery battling with a growing sense of dread. What was this place? Why had Thomas concealed it from me? I rummaged through the boxes, finding nothing but old clothes, books, and trinkets, until one box, hidden under a pile of dusty blankets, caught my attention. It was locked, an old-fashioned padlock securing its contents. My mind raced back to the note. The key is in the box. Did it mean another box, or was it a maddening riddle meant to keep me guessing? My mind spun with possibilities, and I was so engrossed in my thoughts that I almost missed the faint sound of the front door closing. Panic surged through me as I realized Thomas was home. I hastily pushed the bookshelf back into place, my heart pounding in my ears as I tried to compose myself. Thomas found me in the study, Feigning interest in the photo album, he seemed his usual self, though I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes, a flash of suspicion, perhaps. We exchanged pleasantries, yet my mind was elsewhere, returning again and again to the hidden room and the locked box. The days that followed were tense, filled with a quiet anxiety that gnawed at me. I continued my search for the key, though now with a heightened sense of urgency. Aware that Thomas might be more perceptive than I gave him credit for, I explored every corner of the apartment, driven by a need to resolve this mystery before it consumed me entirely. It was a week later, while tidying the linen closet, that I stumbled upon a small, ornate box tucked away at the back. It was unassuming, easy to overlook. Yet something about it called to me. With trembling hands, I opened it and found a tiny, intricately carved key nestled inside. My heart leapt at the discovery, the pieces of the puzzle finally aligning. That evening, while Thomas took a shower, I seized my chance. I slipped into the study, took a deep breath, and pushed the bookshelf open. The hidden room was as I left it, the box still locked, waiting for me. I inserted the key, my hand shaking slightly, and felt a click as the lock released. Inside, I found an array of documents, old photographs, and letters. My eyes skimmed over them, piecing together a story that was both shocking and profoundly unsettling. The documents were legal papers pertaining to an inheritance, yet what caught my attention were the photographs, each depicting Thomas with a woman who was not me, nor anyone I recognized. They were intimate, capturing moments of joy and affection, a life shared with someone else. The letters were the final piece, revealing a history I knew nothing about. Connections, betrayals, a life Thomas had kept hidden. The realization hit me like a cold wave. The apartment, our life together, was built on a foundation of deception. The woman in the photographs was someone he had known long before me, someone who had left a mark that lingered. I was so absorbed in the revelations that I didn't hear Thomas approach until it was too late. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes held a depth I had never seen before. There was no anger, no surprise, just a resignation that chilled me to the core. "I suppose you've figured it out," he said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. I nodded, words failing me as I clutched the evidence of his hidden past. Thomas stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he began, his tone almost apologetic. "I thought I could move on, that I could leave it all behind. But some things are not so easily forgotten." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to ask why, to understand the motives behind the deception, but the questions tangled in my throat, replaced by a growing sense of fear. What did this mean for us, for the life we had built together? "I'm sorry," he said finally, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the tension. "I never wanted you to find out this way." The apology felt hollow, a band-aid over a wound that ran too deep. I left the hidden room, brushing past him, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had discovered. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, its walls closing in with secrets and lies. In the following days, I found it impossible to return to any semblance of normalcy. The once comforting routines were now tainted by doubt. Every interaction colored by the knowledge of what lay beneath the surface. Thomas tried to explain, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us, but the trust was shattered, irreparable. I eventually moved out, unable to reconcile the Thomas I thought I knew with the person revealed by the hidden room. The experience left a mark, a lingering fear that shadowed my relationships thereafter. Trust, once so freely given, became a cautious gift, one I struggled to offer fully. To this day, I wonder about the notes, their purpose, and whether they were intended for me to find or merely remnants of a past life Thomas could not entirely abandon. The truth is, some mysteries are best left unsolved, their secrets a testament to the complexities of the human heart and the labyrinthine paths we navigate in search of connection. The day began like any other, the hum of predictable routine lulling me into a false sense of familiarity. The kettle's whistle punctuated the morning air as I set about preparing breakfast for my family. My wife, Julia, shuffled into the kitchen, her hair still sleep-tousled, and offered me a warm good morning that wrapped around me like a comfortable blanket. Our two children, Lily and Ben, followed soon after, their laughter a bright ripple in the otherwise calm domestic sea. I felt grounded in these moments, an anchor amidst the storm of life. My legal career often demanded long hours, but these morning rituals were sacred, a daily reassurance of normalcy. As I made my way out the door, briefcase in hand, I noticed the mailman approaching. He was new, a replacement for the elderly gentleman who had served our street for years. There was something unsettling about his presence. Though I couldn't quite place it, his eyes seemed to linger a second too long, his smile a bit too tight. I brushed off the feeling with a polite nod and continued on my way. At the office, the day unfolded with the usual cadence of meetings and paperwork, my thoughts rarely straying from the tasks at hand. Yet as the afternoon sun began its descent, a peculiar restlessness settled over me. It was an inexplicable itch, a sense that something was amiss, though there was no visible disruption to suggest why. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to fatigue or perhaps an underlying cold. Returning home that evening, I was greeted by the sound of children's voices and the aroma of dinner wafting from the kitchen. Yet something felt off. Julia's greeting was as warm as ever, yet her eyes carried a flicker of something unreadable. Dismissing it as my own overactive imagination, I joined the family at the dinner table. It was during this meal that the first disturbance made itself known. A small package, innocuously placed at the doorstep, caught my eye. Wrapped in plain brown paper, it bore no return address, only my name scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. Curiosity piqued, I opened it, revealing a single photograph. It depicted my family, Julia, Lily, Ben, and myself, standing in the living room, our expressions frozen in what seemed to be candid joy. Yet I had no recollection of when it was taken. Julia glanced over at the photo and remarked casually, "Someone must have taken it through the window. Creepy, but kind of sweet, I suppose." Her nonchalance was palpable, dismissing it with a wave of her hand. However, the thought of someone observing us so intimately without our knowledge sent a chill down my spine. The days that followed were marked by an ever-growing sense of unease. The mailman continued his rounds, his presence now an unavoidable fixture of my mornings. Each delivery brought with it an inexplicable weight, as if his packages contained more than mere letters. My interactions with Julia and the kids started to feel scripted, as if they were performing roles in a play I wasn't privy to. Conversations felt rehearsed, their responses too quick, too perfect. It was a subtle erosion of reality, a creeping suspicion that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I found solace only in my work, where the predictability of legal texts and case files offered a refuge from the bewildering dynamics at home. Yet even there, I couldn't fully escape the sense of being watched, the feeling that my life had become a spectacle for unseen eyes. The package deliveries continued, each containing another photograph. They were snapshots of everyday moments, reading bedtime stories, watching television, Sunday afternoon picnics. Each image was captured with unnerving clarity, yet none resonated with my memory. My questions about their origins were always met with Julia's dismissive laughter, a reassurance that failed to quell the growing dread in my heart. The escalation came unexpectedly, a crescendo that shattered the fragile facade. One evening, I returned home to find Julia absent and the children unusually quiet. An icy tendril of fear twisted in my gut as I called for her, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. When she finally appeared, her smile was as radiant as ever, yet her explanation for her absence was oddly vague, filled with gaps that I could not fill. That night as I lay in bed, a revelation struck me with chilling clarity. What if my wife and kids were not who they seemed? The thought was absurd, bordering on paranoia, yet it clung to my mind with tenacious persistence. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were actors, performing a seamless charade for reasons beyond my comprehension. In the days that followed, I scrutinized their every move, looking for cracks in their performances. Julia's laughter seemed too bright, Lily's questions too precise, Ben's tantrums too conveniently timed. With each observation, my conviction grew, feeding the dark narrative that had taken root in my mind. The climax arrived with the next package. This time, it contained not a photograph, but a video. The footage showed my family in various states of existence, yet every moment was tainted with an eerie artificiality. Their words, their actions, all seemed orchestrated, lacking the spontaneity of true emotion. Desperation drove me to confront Julia, my accusations spilling out in a torrent of fear and confusion. Her response was calm, almost rehearsed, as she assured me that I was simply under stress, that my imagination was running wild. But her words rang hollow, doing little to dissipate the storm within me. That night, sleep was elusive, the shadows in the room whispering truths I refused to acknowledge. The mailman, the packages, the photographs, they all pointed to a disturbing reality I was not prepared to face. Yet the evidence was undeniable, woven into the fabric of my everyday life. As dawn broke, a sense of resignation settled over me. I rose quietly, making my way to the window. There, under the soft light of morning, stood the mailman, his eyes watching with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. I realized then that I was indeed part of a performance, a meticulously crafted story written by unseen hand. The lingering fear remains a constant companion in my daily life. The sense of being watched, of living within a script, has not faded. I continue to play my part, hoping for a denouement that will bring clarity or release. Yet the truth eludes me, a shadowy specter forever just beyond reach. My family continues their roles, the lines between reality and performance forever blurred. And the mailman, with his unsettling gaze, remains a reminder of the mystery that envelops my existence.
Once, in the heart of Auckland, nestled amidst the humdrum of life and the ceaseless hustle of city sounds, I found myself attending an art residency program. It was a period of creative exploration, as I had been feeling the need to break free from the confines of my usual artistic routines. Auckland, with its vibrant art scene and picturesque landscapes, offered me an ideal canvas upon which to reinvent my work. My studio was situated in a quaint, colonial-era building at the edge of a lush urban forest known as the Auckland Domain. The domain was an expanse of verdant greenery, a silken ripple of nature that breathed life into the concrete matrix of the city. Every morning, as I strolled through its winding paths, the rustle of leaves and the chorus of distant birdsong were my companions. It was peaceful, an oasis amidst chaos. In my studio, I worked tirelessly, painting scenes inspired by the domain's serene beauty. My mind was a tranquil wellspring of creativity, undisturbed by anything beyond the realm of my canvas and brush. The days were repetitive but comforting in their predictability, painting, walking, and occasionally losing myself in the city's bustling markets and quaint cafes. Then, as if an unseen hand had gently nudged my life towards the precipice of the uncanny, I noticed a subtle shift. It began with the sensation of being watched. Initially, I dismissed it as a mere trick of the mind, a byproduct of spending too many hours isolated in my studio. Yet, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. It was as though invisible eyes were tracing my every move, observing me with an intensity that I couldn't quite ignore. I attempted to rationalize it. Perhaps it was the heightened sensitivity of being in a new environment, I thought. I even consulted with a few fellow artists in the residency, but their responses were lukewarm, dismissing my unease as artistic paranoia. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling. One evening, as I returned from a late-night walk through the domain, the first real disturbance occurred. I had been sketching under the moon's pale glow, the night air cool against my skin, when I heard an odd rustling in the underbrush. It was an unusual sound, distinct from the wind's caress or the nocturnal stirrings of wildlife. It was deliberate, purposeful. I paused, squinting into the shadows, heart pounding a steady, ominous rhythm. The rustling stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. A part of me wanted to investigate, to plunge into the darkness and dispel my fears with logic and reason. But another, more primal part urged caution. I retreated, my pace brisk, every step echoing my growing disquiet. In the safety of my studio, I dismissed the incident as a minor scare, perhaps a rodent or a bird. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, the disturbances escalated. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming a constant, unsettling presence. My walks through the domain grew shorter, my mind unable to focus on anything other than the oppressive sensation of eyes upon me. One afternoon, as I sat in my studio wrestling with a particularly stubborn canvas, I noticed something peculiar. The air felt different, charged, as though an electric storm was brewing just beyond the visible spectrum. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. A fleeting shadow, too quick to be natural, flickered at the edge of my vision. I spun around, but found nothing. Still, I was unnerved. Driven by a blend of curiosity and fear, I began to conduct small experiments. I'd leave bits of paper on the floor, arrange items deliberately, hoping to catch evidence of these unseen watchers. Sometimes the papers moved and objects shifted ever so slightly, as if by invisible hands, but never enough to provide concrete proof. It left me in a most unsettling limbo. My art, once a vibrant expression of my inner world, began to shift in tone. The canvases filled with dark, swirling shadows, abstract forms that hinted at entities lurking just beyond the threshold of perception. I became obsessed, my brushstrokes frantic, trying to capture what I felt but could not see. The climax came on a stormy night. The winds howled through the trees, rain slashing against the windows in relentless torrents. I had been hunkered down in my studio, the storm mirroring the tempest within. My nerves were frayed, sanity stretched thin by the ever-present watchers. As I sat, staring blankly at my latest piece, a loud crash reverberated through the room. My heart leapt into my throat as I looked around, eyes wide, searching for the source. A bookshelf had toppled over, books and papers scattered in disarray. But that wasn't what sent a chill down my spine. It was the unmistakable imprint of a hand, large and undefined, pressed into the fabric of the curtain by the window. I stood, frozen, my mind racing. Was this it? The watchers finally revealing themselves? As I edged closer, the handprint faded, as though it had never been. The storm outside seemed to intensify, the winds whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, feeling the oppressive weight of the watcher's gaze even more acutely. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I sat in the dim light of my studio, surrounded by the remnants of my work and the specters of my imagination, listening to the storm rage outside. I could feel them surrounding me, their presence as tangible as the brush in my hand, yet utterly unseen. The experience left a lingering fear that shadowed my every moment. Even as the storm abated and the calm returned, the watchers remained, their presence woven into the fabric of my life. I completed my residency, my art forever changed by the unseen entities that haunted my every brush stroke. When I returned home, the familiar surroundings offered little comfort. The watchers seemed to follow, their scrutiny a constant reminder of the unknown that lurks just beyond our senses. To this day, I paint, driven by a compulsion to capture the ineffable essence of the watchers. Each canvas is a testament to their presence, a silent scream echoing the fear that never truly leaves. I've come to accept their gaze, though never entirely at ease, always aware that the boundary between the seen and unseen is but a fragile veil, easily breached by those who choose to watch from the shadows. And so, in the quiet moments, when the world slows and the night encroaches, I feel them, the hidden watchers, ever present, ever vigilant, an eerie reminder of the mysteries that dwell just beyond our grasp. Ruth had always taken pride in her home, not just because of its ultra-modern design, with its sharp angles, glass walls, and a seamless integration with the surrounding forest, but also because of the way it reflected her personality. Immaculate. Every corner of the house echoed her penchant for cleanliness. The floors gleamed, devoid of dust. The glass panels sparkled, allowing the soft green glow of the forest to seep into the rooms. Everything had its place, and that was the way Ruth liked it. The forest was a comforting backdrop, a picturesque view from her expansive living room that offered a glimpse into a world that was wild and untamed, contrasting sharply with the controlled environment within. Ruth would often sit on her sleek, white sofa, sipping herbal tea while watching the dance of sunlight filtering through the canopy of trees. Her life was a measured routine, and she liked it that way, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But then things began to change. It started with a small, almost imperceptible shift. The first disturbance came one chilly autumn morning. Ruth had woken up early, as she always did, ready to perform her daily ritual of cleaning and organizing. As she descended the staircase into the living room, her eyes were drawn to something peculiar. The glass door leading to the patio was slightly ajar. A sliver of crisp morning air had slipped into the room, carrying with it a handful of golden leaves from the forest. Ruth frowned, her forehead creasing with concern. She was certain she had locked the door the night before. She always did. With a slight tremor in her hands, she pushed the door shut, the click of the lock resonating louder than usual in the morning silence. She shrugged it off as a lapse, perhaps a moment of forgetfulness. After all, even the most meticulous person could overlook such a small detail. Yet, the feeling lingered like an itch she couldn't quite scratch. As the days wore on, more anomalies surfaced. Objects would shift from their designated spots, utensils in the kitchen would appear slightly rearranged, and the scent of something unfamiliar would hang in the air. Ruth found herself questioning her memory, her own mind. Was she becoming careless, or was something else amiss? The escalation was subtle but persistent. Ruth began to notice footprints, faint, muddied impressions that smeared the pristine floor. They seemed to originate from the patio door and meandered through various rooms before disappearing as mysteriously as they appeared. Her vacuum cleaner became her new best friend, as she meticulously erased any signs of the intrusion. But the question remained, who or what was invading her space? Ruth decided to increase security. She installed a state-of-the-art surveillance system, its cameras discreetly placed to blend in with the house's modern aesthetic. Each night, she would review the recorded footage, combing through hours of mundane scenes until her eye ached. Yet, There was nothing out of the ordinary, no shadowy figure caught in the act. It was as if the disturbance was mocking her, dancing just beyond her reach. The situation reached its climax one stormy night. Rain lashed against the glass walls, and the wind howled, resonating through the structure like a mournful spirit. Ruth was in her bedroom, the soft glow of her bedside lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Her heart was heavy with an unshakable anxiety that had become an unwelcome companion. She had taken to sleeping with the lights on, a breach of her usual discipline, but necessary for her peace of mind. As she lay in bed, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain, a noise caught her attention, a faint, almost imperceptible creaking sound that seemed to come from the living room. Ruth's heart skipped a beat. She sat up, straining to hear over the storm. The noise came again, this time louder, more insistent. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Her heart pounding in her chest, Ruth rose from her bed, every muscle tense with apprehension. She crept toward the door, her bare feet silent on the floor. With a deep breath, she opened the door and peered into the dimly lit hallway. The house was still, the only sound the relentless rain. Gathering her courage, she moved down the stairs, each step feeling like an eternity. When she reached the living room, she froze. The patio door was wide open, rain splattering the floor, and standing in the doorway was a figure, silhouetted against the stormy night. The figure was tall, draped in dark clothing that seemed to meld with the shadows. For a moment, Ruth was paralyzed, her mind racing with fear and disbelief. How could this be happening? Her sanctuary had been breached. The figure turned slowly, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was something mesmerizing about those eyes, a predatory gleam that both terrified and entranced her. Time seemed to stand still, the air thick with tension. Then, in a fluid motion, the figure stepped back into the darkness, disappearing into the forest. Ruth stood there, the rain continuing to pour in, her heart racing, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She hurried to the door, slamming it shut with trembling hands before engaging every lock. Her breath came in short gasps as she backed away, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting the shadows to come alive. The fear lingered, a gnawing presence that refused to leave. Even as the storm subsided and dawn broke over the horizon, Ruth couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. She replayed the events of the night over and over in her mind, questioning her sanity, her safety. The pristine order of her home felt violated, tainted by an unseen menace. In the weeks that followed, Ruth became a prisoner of her own fears, her obsession with cleanliness morphing into something darker, more desperate. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind through the trees sent her heart into a frantic dance. She cleaned obsessively, as if scrubbing away the invisible fingerprints of her predator. But no matter how much she scrubbed and polished, she couldn't erase the feeling that her sanctuary was no longer her own. The forest, once a tranquil backdrop, now seemed to loom ominously, its shadows deep and impenetrable. Ruth watched from behind glass walls with uneasy eyes, her sense of security shattered. She had become a captive in her own home, trapped by the red flag she had ignored until it was too late. And there, in the stillness, she waited, knowing somewhere, out there in the woods, the seductive predator watched and waited too.
In the heart of the bustling city, nestled within a maze of indistinct buildings, Josie's apartment was an oasis of calm neutrality. The walls were a gentle eggshell white, devoid of any embellishments except for a solitary clock that ticked steadily in the silence. A beige couch faced a muted television set, and a small coffee table bore an array of neatly stacked magazines, each cover a burst of vibrancy against the subdued background. Josie's bedroom mirrored the rest of her home in its simplicity. Her bed was perfectly made, a sterile white comforter pulled tight with 2 pillows placed just so. A modest vanity stood in the corner, holding an assortment of cosmetics and skincare products, all lined up like soldiers awaiting inspection. Her wardrobe consisted of monochromatic attire, shades of black, white, and gray that reflected her preference for order over chaos. Josie herself was a study in contrasts. By day, she was the epitome of professionalism, exuding an aura of quiet competence as she moved through her role at a local publishing house. Her colleagues admired her efficiency and calm demeanor, though few dared to claim they knew her well. By night, she retreated into the comfort of her solitary sanctuary, relishing the tranquility that her apartment provided. Yet, there was one exception to her regimented life: her fascination with color. It was a secret indulgence that Josie allowed herself, a private world that no one else was privy to. She would often spend hours sifting through color swatches, studying the subtle differences between teal and turquoise, or pondering the warm embrace of a vibrant scarlet. The first disturbance came quietly, like a whisper in the dark. Josie had been browsing through a new collection of swatches she had acquired, her fingers brushing over the luxurious textures with reverence. That was when she noticed it. A single thread of vivid vermilion curled at the edge of her thumb. It was a shade she had never seen before, rich and deep, as if it held within it the essence of life itself. Intrigued, she attempted to pull it away, but the thread seemed to resist her efforts, clinging stubbornly to her skin, startling her to thinking, some of it. Oh, she brushed it aside as a curious fluke, a peculiar but ultimately harmless anomaly. But the thread appeared again the next day, this time woven through the fabric of her work blouse. It was the same haunting shade, catching the light with a sinister glint. Josie felt a shiver of unease, but logic quelled her rising apprehension. She attributed it to a manufacturing flaw, or perhaps an overzealous streak of dye. Yet, as the days progressed, the thread's presence became more insistent. It began to manifest in unexpected places: the hem of her skirt, the seam of her coat, even entwined within the bristles of her hairbrush. Each time she discovered it, a chill would snake its way down her spine, leaving her with an inexplicable sense of dread. Josie began to suspect she was being haunted not by a ghost, but by the color itself. It invaded her dreams, wrapping around her subconscious like a creeping vine. She would awaken in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, convinced that the color had seeped into her very being. It was during one of these restless nights that she noticed a peculiar change. In the dim light of her bedroom, she caught sight of her reflection in the vanity mirror. Her eyes, normally a soft hazel, seemed to shimmer with an unfamiliar hue, the same eerie shade of vermilion that had been trailing her for weeks. The escalation was as subtle as it was relentless. The color began to seep into her life with a persistence that defied explanation. It was in the food she ate, the drink she sipped, even the air she breathed. She could taste it, a metallic tang that lingered on her tongue long after the meal had ended. She could smell it, a faint, acrid scent that clung to her skin and hair. Josie's world, once a sanctuary of muted tones, had become a cacophony of unsettling vibrance. Her obsession with color, once a harmless pastime, twisted into a compulsion. She spent hours locked in her apartment, meticulously cataloging every instance of the vermilion thread's appearance. She scoured her wardrobe for traces of it, tearing apart seams and unraveling fabric in a desperate search for understanding. Her work suffered. Her colleagues noted her distracted demeanor, her once impeccable appearance now unkempt and frazzled. Yet, Josie could not stop. She was driven by a need to uncover the truth behind the color's relentless pursuit. The climax, arrived on a night that promised nothing out of the ordinary. Josie had returned from work, her mind buzzing with the usual unanswered questions. She shed her coat, oblivious to the vermilion thread that spiraled down from its collar like a mocking taunt. She settled into her evening routine, her movements mechanical and devoid of thought. It wasn't until she stood before the mirror, preparing to wash her face, that the horror truly unfolded. Her reflection stared back at her with wide, terrified eyes. The vermilion hue had spread, overtaking the soft hazel and transforming her irises into twin orbs of fiery intensity. Her skin, once pale and unblemished, was marred by fine lines of crimson that traced a web across her cheeks. She touched her face, expecting to feel the familiar warmth of flesh, but instead her fingers encountered a texture that was alien, almost fabric-like. Panic surged within her, a tidal wave of fear that threatened to drown her. She clawed at her skin, desperate to peel away the layer of horror that had claimed her reflection. But with each frantic tug, the vermilion thread unraveled further, revealing a tapestry of color beneath. Her screams echoed through the apartment, a symphony of anguish and disbelief. She could feel herself unraveling, each thread of her being pulled apart in a nightmarish tableau. The morning found Josie huddled in the corner of her bedroom, her body trembling with exhaustion. The apartment was eerily silent, the aftermath of her ordeal hanging heavy in the air. Her reflection in the mirror was once again her own, the vermilion threads nowhere to be seen. Yet, the fear lingered, a shadow that refused to dissipate. She could not shake the sensation of being watched, the unsettling awareness that the color was still with her, lurking just beyond the periphery of her vision. Josie's life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the lingering fear remained a constant companion. She resumed her daily routine, her movements deliberate and cautious. She avoided mirrors, wary of the truth they might reveal. The vermilion thread was gone, but its impression had been indelibly etched into her consciousness. She lived in perpetual anticipation of its return, a haunting specter that had transformed her world from a place of order to a realm tinged with the unnerving brilliance of her obsession. And so, in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Josie waited. She waited for the day when the vermilion would return, when the color of her obsession would once again unfurl its sinister tendrils and envelop her in its embrace. She waited, knowing that she could never truly escape its grasp, for the color had become a part of her, a reflection of the darkness that had always lain dormant within.